Now, so far we've been discussing central police system in the context of homogeneous plane, and on the plane we're assuming that the population are evenly distributed. What if the population are unevenly distributed, especially in urban areas? We know that close to the central city there's a high density of population. When you move toward suburban locations, when you move toward rural areas, the density of population declined. What would happen to the shape and the size of those market areas? And here is a solution proposed by Assad, who is a very famous scholar in the study of central place theory and 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 location and also the regional science and regional economics. Now, he proposed that when the density of population very dense close to central city, you expect that the market area becomes small, but in places where the density of population become lower, the market area of the same services become larger. The reason is quite straightforward because for a particular service, you need a certain number of people uh, to survive. There's a notion of a threshold. To keep that threshold in places with high population density, you would need only a smaller area to satisfy that threshold. And that's why in locations close to central city with high population density, you expect that the market area becomes smaller. But here, when you move to places with lower population density, you would need a larger area to have the same number of customers to meet the requirement of the threshold, and therefore the market area for the same service activities will become larger. So that is a very insightful uh, discovery, very insightful statement concerning the variations in how the population density variation would affect the size of market areas. So this is an important contribution by Assad. Now let's look at some people want to go to the real world to see whether there's any evidence in the real world that largely conform to the conclusion from central place theory. So some people have gone to Western China. In Western China, there's a province called Sichuan province. Sichuan province, there's a big plain in the middle of the Sichuan province. These plains largely can be seen as a homogeneous plain. So on this homogeneous plain, there are some counties, and they look at the shape of the counties and look at the shape of counties. We know in those counties they hold periodical market. So they have this free market that they take turn to hold a free market. And this time, this week is in this town, in this county, and next week is free market is held in another county. Therefore, the shape of different counties eventually was influenced by how the open free market is organized. And when you organize a free market, people would need to travel to the free market. And when they travel to a free market, they would try to minimize the effort to get to the market. So eventually, the shape of the county was also influenced by how the free market is organized, and therefore that eventually people believe that it gave rise to a structure similar to what you would see in central place theory. That is, the shape of counties, some of the counties begin to take the shape of hexagonal shape. Look at this county, look at this county, and it's a county center. That's where they need to organize the free market. This is another county center where they need to organize the free market. Therefore, over time, the shape of those counties begin to take the shape of hexagonal shape, the kind of shape that Koestler proposed for his central place theory in his book. And this kind of shape somehow is, compare this a real shape on the ground with those shapes that you would expect to see in central place theory. So you find some kind of similarity there. So you can arguably suggest that we do see some kind of evidence that support the conclusion from central place theory. Then this is a study that look at how the retail center in a province of Canada, Saskatchewan, how they form this kind of a hierarchical structure. So you have the functions of a service that come at different importance. At the bottom, some very centers that serve very basic functions. This is minimum convenience center and move up to full convenience center. Then you have a partial shopping center, complete shopping center. Then you have a secondary and a primary wholesale center. So when you move up, this function become more complete, become more specialized, and that's why you look at those functions of different levels. You compare with the number of centers that carry those functions. You realize that a more basic function for those centers that serve more basic services, you have a larger number of them. But for those centers that serve more complete services, you have a smaller number of them. So that's exactly what you would expect to see that really conform to central place theory. And this is the map that illustrates the location of those functions of different sizes. You look at those square are those more complete functions. There are only a few of them. But you have this circle, it's convenience centers, very basic function. There are many of them, and they are really close to each other. But for those more specialized functions centers, they are further apart. So really consistent with some of the points from central place theory. And this is a daily urban system from the U.S. federal government. They suggest a system where people daily travel pattern largely surround metropolitan area. So this is a map that is made by using metropolitan center at the settlement center and the surrounding area that provide daily services for people. People would travel from their home to the metropolitan center to work on daily basis. That is what they call daily urban system. So daily urban system can be seen as an example of a central place system that serve people the daily needs of work. So that is also can see that as evidence of a central place system, how people organize their daily life surrounding a metropolitan center, and that eventually we see the formation of this daily urban system across of the United States. Okay, so that's so these are all evidence that we can use to support the central place theory. And remember, when we talk about central place theory, we see that as a theory that explains the geographical pattern of service activity. And individual services, individual consumers, how they organize their life geographically, that can be understood from central place theory. Now, we also have this theory called global cities or world cities. We can see this as a theoretical basis to explain the business service activities and public service activities, also high-end consumer services. You know, we know the central place theory can be seen as a conceptual structure that explains the geographical pattern of consumer service activity. But for businesses, for high-end public services, also for high-end consumer services, these notions of global cities or world cities provide some kind of explanation. Now, let's first define the concept of world cities. World cities, also called global cities, these are the concepts that emerged down the mid-1980s with emergence of this latest wave of globalization. And people begin to see that some cities in the world play a very, very disproportionate role than other cities. And they call these cities that play such a big role as world cities. But development of globalization since the 1990s and 2000, and the globalization became more kind of a popular term. And therefore, the term of world cities changed to global cities. So today, when we talk about global cities, we also mean the world cities. So these two terms are interchangeable. So these global cities or world cities refer to those cities that play some very important role in global economy, and they are at the very top of the world settlement hierarchy. What kind of activities that tend to be important in global cities? First, you have economic activities. These mostly are business service activities, and they are uh, uh, major financial services, insurance industries, and real estate companies, the big banking firms, accounting firms, and marketing, legal services. So these are all very important activities to serve the needs of a major corporations, big businesses, and they are there not serving the needs of individual consumers, but mainly to serve the needs of big businesses. Okay. Then you have also political functions, and these global cities tend to be the location of headquarters of large corporations and also high-end government institutions such as national government, international institutions, big corporations. Uh, think about Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. has the U.S. government and also has the headquarters of the World Bank and headquarters of International Monetary Funds. So it's very important play a very important political functions. And the cultural functions, they are the center of major arts, culture, entertainment, and sports centers. Think about New York City, and it has important performing arts center, the cultural institutions, also the important entertainment center. Think about Los Angeles, and also important sports centers. And also, the global cities tend to have very sophisticated infrastructure. They tend to be centers of multiple transportation modes and centers. And also, they have facilities in communication and transportation that serve not only customers within the settlement, but also in the large areas that surround the centers. And so these are the four important criteria that the people use to identify what cities are world cities and what cities are global cities. So economic, political, cultural, and infrastructure. Okay. So people use these functions to collect data and rank different cities to see how important they are in economic, political, cultural, and infrastructure. Then they rank, oh, this is number one, and that is number two, so on and so forth. And so far, there are different scholars, different institutions try to engage in ranking world cities. But different institutions, different scholars may come up with a conclusion that are not entirely the same. So specific ranking could be different among different researchers, different institutions. We just look at a couple of examples here regarding how people rank world cities. This is an example that comes in the 1980s, mid-1980s, where people probably for the very first time they come up with a system to specify what cities are very top of what cities which is not only secondary importance. This is one example of how people rank what cities. Now, in this system, we look at uh, the world cities in different tiers. The first tier, they are called truly world cities. They play a global role. Then second tier, they are only regional cities, and they are only or sub-regional cities. They do not play a very important role globally, but they play a role at the regional level or at sub-regional level. Then you also have third tier city. They are more special. They are more kind of play some specialized function at the regional local level. And also they have a fourth tier. They are called dependent centers. They do not play any kind of command control role. They are dependent upon other cities for their own functions. Okay. Now let's focus on the first tier because the first tiers are the true world cities. Within the first tier, they feel the need to divide cities within this tier into some sub layers. So within this first tier, they first have a dominant world cities. And here you have the top three, the New York City, London, and Tokyo. Then you have a next level within the first tier, major world cities. Here you have Chicago, Los Angeles, Paris, Milan, Frankfurt, Singapore, and Hong Kong. Then you have secondary world cities, and San Francisco, Washington, D.C., and so on and so forth. So this is how, in the 1980s, people divide, come up with these rankings of cities that we call world cities. Okay, so that you have these three subgroups within world cities. The reason for these three cities to be on the top of all other world cities, New York City, London, and Tokyo, is financial. These three cities at that time were the most important international financial centers, and also they serve the needs of investors. They want to have 24 hours a day, 7 days of trading in the global market. So when the stock market closes in Europe, you can move on to New York, to North America. When the stock market in North America stops, you can move to Asia to keep trading in Tokyo stock market. So you can just 24 hours a day without stopping. And that's how the three cities play that kind of role. Of course, in addition, the three cities are also very important location for corporate headquarters and other business services. So not just financial services, they play a critical role in many other areas. But one of the most important reasons for the three cities to be on the top of world cities is that they are all the international financial center at the time. Okay. Then, so this is one example, and this is the map that shows that those three levels of world cities down to 1980s, and this is a map that shows not only the world cities on the first tier, which we call world cities, but also they have shown second tier cities, the command and control center, next tier is specialized producer and service center, and finally the last tier, the dependent centers. And here the red color dot, the circle, world cities. So obviously, back then you have New York City, Washington D.C., Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Houston, and Miami are all part of world cities, but they are just at a different level of world cities. In addition, you can see many other cities in the U.S. are in other tiers of this global settlement system. Let's see St. Louis. St. Louis here, at that point, is within the second tier, the regional command and control center. So that where St. Louis sit in this entire international settlement hierarchy. But Seoul is obviously is not part of world city, but it is a regional command control center. Okay. So that is one example. A more recent example is by a different institution, and in this season, they divide the whole international uh, settlement hierarchy into three levels. They use Greek letter to label them, and top tier is alpha, and then you have a beta, then you have a gamma, and now within each of these categories, you can be further divided. For example, in alpha, you could have alpha plus plus, and alpha plus, alpha itself, and alpha minus, just depending upon the importance. And same can be done for those categories that we say beta and gamma. Now let's see world cities. So world cities obviously had to be alpha. So 2012, when they come up with this classification of world cities, only New York and London is on top. We don't see Tokyo anymore. So this is alpha plus plus. Then you see alpha plus, and Tokyo dropped down to this tier. So obviously somehow the importance of Tokyo is declined compared with the mid 1980s. And part of the reason may be that since 1990s, Japan's economy suffered recession, slowdown, stagnation. That's why they suffered a lot of financial loss, and therefore the importance of Tokyo as the international financial center has declined compared with New York City and London. Okay. Also, you have alpha, and you see that within the alpha categories, these are three different tiers. Okay. Now, what you see here is that compared with the 1980s classification, you have more countries from the developing world joined these top levels. So now you have Beijing, Shanghai, Dubai. You also have Kuala Lumpur. These cities from and Mumbai from developing countries join these top three layers of world cities. That is a significant development since the 1990s, and that is probably was really correct to reevaluate the situation. What cities become more significant in the global economy compared with in the 1980s. So this is really more realistic reflection of what is happening in the global economies. Okay, and so this is the map that reflects this alpha of alpha cities. Just on this map, you see more than what we show on last slides, because on these slides, you not only you see alpha plus plus, alpha plus, and alpha, you also see some cities that are labeled as alpha minus. So give you a sense of you have more tiers within the global cities. Okay. Then on this map, you can also see that not only you have alpha, but also beta and gamma cities. So that's is a more complete view of the international settlement hierarchy. So we can use this as a way to interpret the hierarchical structure of business services, also high-end public services and high-end consumer services. So this central place theory and the theory of global cities really provide some kind of conceptual structure for us to understand how the service activities are organized geographically. Okay. And this map gave us a sense of within the United States how this alpha, beta, gamma system work out. So in this context, we can really see it, New York City, Toronto, of Canada, Chicago, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Miami, Dallas, Atlanta are part of a alpha system. And St. Louis here is in beta. In the beta, you can see beta minus. Again, so less as important as those in alpha system. Also, there are other cities that are gamma. So that's is give us a sense of how, again, one example of how people use the existing category to rank of cities in this international settlement hierarchy.